annual commemoration month of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis, where more than 1 million Rwandans died in the 100 days of the genocide. Of course, a lot has been going on in the reconciliation phase, but of course questions still linger 24 years later on the efforts that are being put by those in charge or those in power to actually bring to book the perpetrators of the genocide against the Tutsis. My name, as always, is Eugene Adnangwe, and over the next 1 hour, that is definitely what we'll be talking about right here on the program. Let me bring on board my panelists right here. We have Kwibuka24-Tracking, the Prosecutor General. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Anangwe.
Also with us on the program is Tom Dahiro, Genocide Scholar. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Welcome.
Right. So, we have gotten to, the commemoration month of the genocide against the Tutsis, and of course it's been 24 years since the horrific the tragedy that struck Rwanda as far as the genocide is concerned. And Bosco, one of the things that most people are talking about is, yes, much as there's reconciliation, justice also needs to be served.
Yes.
And that has been in the line or in the side of tracking down of the fugitives who still remain at large. I want to hear from you, where are we today as far as bringing to book those who actually took part in the genocide against the Tutsis are concerned? Okay.
Thank you, Eugene. I think we've made very significant strides, but we still have a long way to go. But first of all, before I tell you where we are, I think you have to understand that our country in 1994, in as far as the legal criminal landscape was concerned, the Rwandan laws in place at that time did not punish the crime of genocide. So that was a challenge that we had. So what the government did was first to put in place legal mechanisms that would be able to hold accountable those who had committed the crimes. So that was around 1996, and a few years later, then we had Gacaca courts coming to existence and holding accountable those who committed such serious and heinous crimes. So, but later we had our major legal and judicial reforms kicking off 2004, and but we realized actually that many people, apart from the ones who are being tried in the domestic courts, but many people had fled the country and had committed genocide. And so because of a number of challenges that the country had at that time, I mean the security and the welfare of the citizens, the taking care of the survivors of the genocide and holding accountable all those that had committed the crimes. So the issue of fugitives was still kind of hanging, even though ICTL had done some commendable job by holding accountable most of the senior government officials, military leaders, the clergy, the businessmen, and the key perpetrators. But we had quite a big number of them still moving freely around the world. So now, where we are is, we have been trying for the last 10 years to track the genocide fugitives living in different countries. The government established the Fugitives Tracking Unit in our office, in the Prosecutor's office, and that was 2007, around November. And then in April 2008, we had this unit being reinforced in terms of having prosecutors and investigators working with our partners in different countries to receive indictments and international arrest warrants and completed dossiers. So we have been able to receive 18 cases now coming to Rwanda in the last decade, and we have been able to have 21 cases completed, tried in some countries, especially in Europe and the US. So we are also having continued cooperation with many countries in terms of mutual legal assistance and cooperation in criminal matters. So there is an ongoing process in terms of holding them accountable. So it's going to take long. Right. Definitely, we are talking about 18 cases extradited to Rwanda in 10 years. In 10 years. That's a drop in the ocean. Yeah.
Yes, and I want to hear from Dairo, from the perspective of the survivors of the genocide. Let's talk about what they would be feeling right now, 24 years later, as John Bosco says, 18 cases in 10 years, a drop in the ocean. What sort of mood do you feel is actually on the ground as far as those who've been seeking justice, for these crimes, against those who actually took part in the genocide against the Tutsis? What could they be thinking right now as we speak?
Oh, the thinking is that if you look at what happened in Rwanda in 1994, the genocide had another context. Had it been only Rwandans involved in this crime, without external backers or external supporters, I think the story would be different.
How different would it be?
It would be different because I would have expected, and many would have expected, cooperation from the international community as an obligation by the Genocide Convention of preventing and punishing the crime. The world, all the United Nations was present when the genocide happened here, but that didn't help. But at the same time, Rwandan government, which was responsible to the commission of these crimes, was a non-permanent member of the Security Council. So all deliberations in the United Nations, the genocidaires were present. And their backers, all their supporters, principally France, was there as a permanent member of the Security Council. So soon as these genocidaires were defeated, they got a soft landing outside the borders. I would remind people that actually the Prime Minister Jean Kambanda and President Theodore Sindikubwabo were airlifted by French helicopters from Gisenyi to Bukavu. And many others, genocidaires took refuge in Goma and in Bukavu, and as many had gone to Tanzania in late April. Most of the killers in the eastern province had got sanctuary in Tanzanian refugee camps. I'm giving this as a background for people to understand how it happened. By 1996, there were 3 countries in Africa which had become a safe haven for genocidaires. The first one was Zaire, the current DRC.
DRC, yes.
The second was Tanzania, and the third was Kenya. Kenya had been turned into sort of an operational background, operational ground for the genocidaires, because this was an international gateway whereby you had and you still have many international organizations operating in Nairobi. The newspaper Kangura was the incendiary newspaper was still published in Nairobi, sold on the streets of Nairobi. They had the intelligence units operating there. They had, of course, most of the academics who had left the University in Butare teaching in Nairobi, and they were safe there. So even military transactions, whereby the military arms purchases, these are on record, were going on. But it is during that time that most of those funders or those bakers were busy trying to rehabilitate them. Apart from the government of France and the Vatican or the Catholic Church, there is another organization called International Christian Democrats, IDC, who were moving up and down from Belgium to Bukavu to Goma, trying to support them. And of course, presidents like Mobutu were not ready to surrender these killers.
Right.
But most important, maybe where I would end, is one would find it an anecdote, but it is relevant today why we still have fugitives. In 1995, around October, November, France sent a Kenyan, a diplomat by the name of Denis Okumu. And he came with a message to Vice President Paul Kagame, the president today. And among other things was to grant impunity to genocidaires. And France was telling him, look here, we know you want these people punished. We are going to select maybe 12 or a dozen or two. Just deal with those and forget about the rest. So this situation in the context of France has not changed.
It has not changed. Right. And John Bosco, when you listen to this from a prosecutor general point of view, why I ask that question is, how would the survivors be feeling today, and even the Rwandans at large? Would they be feeling let down? Would they be feeling like the fire that was there in the stomachs of all those who were trying so hard to bring to book the genocidaires has sort of gone out? Today we are in a society where there's a lot of technology and advancement in all these things, which begs the question, why would we still be having fugitives out there? Why would it still be difficult to apprehend these people today?
Yes, a number of issues come across this, because however much we've been trying to get close to our partners from different countries, there has been a lot of challenges. So there has been some stumbling blocks that do not allow us to proceed.
What are those stumbling blocks?
And some of these is the legal related issues. One is there has been probably lack of political willingness by some countries to take it up as one of the priorities, because genocide is an international crime, and under the universality principle, for those countries that have ratified the Genocide Convention of 1948, you are required to either extradite or try those suspects. So as long as you are a signatory to that convention, then you have no reason, because the convention requires you to come up with a tribunal that is going to handle those cases. That is one. But some countries will always want to say there is no treaty. But the issue of the treaty is about cooperation in criminal matters. But doesn't stop you from going forward, conduct investigations, and conduct substantive trials in your jurisdictions. We have seen some countries doing this, but still, as I told you, it is not moving as fast as we want. We have seen a number of countries in Europe conducting domestic trials in Europe. Sweden has done so, and Belgium, Norway, Finland, the Netherlands, France, even though the cases are not many, but are not significant, but we have started seeing a shift in how countries understand this. So the other issue is, of course, the conduct of fugitives themselves. I mean, these fugitives change addresses, change names, they tend to corrupt. There are some countries where law enforcement could easily be corrupted. And this is a fact. Some countries, it is most likely that these people have established networks in the countries where they are hiding. So it becomes very difficult even to have the law enforcement on board. So we try to speak to our partners in different countries in the established mechanism of cooperation in criminal matters, and make sure that we give them all the details. I want to tell you that we have issued close to 900 international arrest warrants in the last decade.
But how many have been honored? How many have come up,
So
when the net is pulled back? How many fugitives?
Only 18 out of those have been sent back to Rwanda. 21 have been tried in different countries. That is a drop in the ocean. It's a very small number. So I started talking about political willingness, because I believe personally that if the political establishment of a particular country took up the issue of genocide fugitives in their countries and decided to condemn it, to condemn the presence of those fugitives, and call upon all the concerned institutions in the country to take it as a serious matter, I think that issue will be addressed as quick as possible. But we know criminal procedures are a bit hectic. Sometimes they don't go as quick as we want. But at least we should see them starting. We should see a criminal investigation starting. Yes, some investigations have started. They have been going on for 5, 6, 10 years. So we don't see an end in sight in what is taking place sometimes. So we keep on pushing them. So they need to understand that this is an international crime that has to be tried or extradited. Well, we had the International Tribunal for 20 years in Arusha, which tried most of the key perpetrators, close to probably 70, some acquittals, some convictions, some releases. Fine. That is one part of the international community recognizing that genocide against the Tutsi was committed in this country, and so the international community appreciated this happened and then took up a decision to have a tribunal. But then we have a very big challenge. We are talking about Europe having conducted a number of trials. But we also have African countries that have not even conducted single trials.
Any trial.
So it's also another issue.
It's a big challenge. I mean, Dahiro, listening to that, of course, you've mentioned then the 3 countries that really did take in some of those fugitives. You mentioned specifically Kenya, which was even, you know, a command center, sort of. He speaks of, you know, the lack of political will, the lack of commitment to actually deal with this. What sort of advice would you be giving, sort of, you know, that would make these efforts of actually tracking these fugitives bear fruits even faster? Because he says 90, you know, warrants, only 18.
Close to 900.
Sorry, 900, and then only 18. I mean, it beats all logics. I mean,
Eugene, before you proceed, will you allow me to clarify something?
Yes, yes.
Even though I say that political willingness is a key aspect in investigating international crimes of this nature, but I must appreciate that there are a number of countries that have been willing to cooperate with us. They have come to Rwanda, conducted investigations, went back to their jurisdictions, and conducted substantive trials. And that one I must really appreciate that something has been done by some countries. So the pace at which these trials are being conducted is the one that we question.
It's bringing issues.
But otherwise, even the countries that has received a number of indictments in Europe, some of them have gone to court with these fugitives suspects and they have been tried. So it's not a generalized thing that countries do not have political willingness. There are some countries that have been cooperative, showed political willingness, and have brought these people to trial.
And have done something about it.
And they have done something, yeah.
So as he actually taps on the back of those who have actually done a good thing, is this time to actually name and shame those who are not actually showing commitment? Will this help? Will this help us to fast track the process?
I think it is important. It's not even he's using a politically correct word or description of political will or political willingness. I would rather use indifference. Indifference would be appropriate. If you have genocidaires or fugitives, and you know these are people who are supposed to be tried either by your courts or to be extradited where they committed the crimes, and you don't do it, and instead you keep on saying, you see, there is a problem of justice in Rwanda, but you're not doing it in your country. Here I'm referring to the Great Britain or the United Kingdom. They have a number of them, I think it's about 5 or 6 suspects who are there, even some who have changed the names to hide their identity. And they have not, the cases have been going on, and the reasons given by judges, it's, oh, we don't trust Rwandan courts that they will deliver, they will give justice to these fugitives. Well, let's assume the justice system in Rwanda is not perfect, but you have a justice system which you trust.
Yes.
Why can't you trust why can't you try these? Why can't you try these people?
Yes. Yes.
That's why I'm saying this is an unacceptable indifference trying these fugitives or these suspects of the genocide is an international obligation. It's not in favor of Rwandans. It's a matter of saving humanity. If you read the preamble of the Genocide Convention, it talks about how humanity suffered because of these crimes, in the world history. Now, this thing is happening at a time when the world can easily communicate. But it's not happening as supposed to be. He can give, the Prosecutor General can give a good example of countries like France who come here, conduct investigations, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 20, but there's no trial, and whenever there is, it's just only one. And you have to ask yourself, why this indifference? This is a crime which shook the whole world as it happened. It is a crime that that was not committed in concentration camps as it happened during the Second World War. It's a crime that sometimes was carried out in front of cameras of the international media. Yet, it is as if this thing happened outside our planet, and someone has to carry out an investigation with the satellites.
Right.
You see?
Yes.
And when you look at the language used by some people who support these people, it tells you the cause of indifference. One, for me, I think it is indifference to Africans, or to what happens, or the plight of the Africans.
Yeah, but he says there are even African countries.
Yes, I'm coming back to that. I'm coming back to that.
Yes.
I'm coming back to that. From when the prosecution started the Fugitives Tracking Unit, I had created some sort of private genocide ideologue tracking unit, my own, just the ideologues. And I realized that these ideologues spotted that weakness in the international community, and they started using that indifference for their own benefit. And they knew some of these African countries can easily buy their ideology, and by buying that ideology, it turns the African countries to have much more indifference than even the European countries. Kenya at least surrendered some fugitives who were eventually tried, including the former Prime Minister, the editor of Kangura, and a few others. Uganda has surrendered, I think, extradited 1 or 2. I don't remember Tanzania surrendering any. Zambia cooperated.
Zimbabwe too.
Zimbabwe too, but the first was Zimbabwe. Cameroon did. Sometimes back in 1996, 1997, the Bogosoras, the Nahima, Semanza, Nigerura came from Cameroon. The DRC, yes, they did some. Bizimungu came from there, and a few others, but many more are still there. Kabuga Felician disappeared in Kenya, but everybody knew was in Kenya. But eventually, he was there without being there, and he's one of the fugitives, at least in Nabwana Fugitives, because he was the prime funder of the genocidal machinery. But when you look at what happens, France has a hand in that. For me, my appreciation, and from my research, there is a link between some European countries and some Africans to facilitate
this.
To facilitate the impunity.
Right.
That would in favor of these genocidaires. But
genocidaires.
Europe has been also a center, a nerve center of the genocide fugitives, to even come out in the open to keep on spewing their heinous propaganda.
Right.
I need to just say something that Tom has just hinted on briefly.
Yes.
The issue of justice and fair trial that has been raised by a number of countries and by the media and by the defense lawyers of some of the suspects. I want to tell you one thing, that it is absolutely untrue for anybody to allege that anyone sent to Rwanda to face trial will not receive a fair trial. That's not right. I mean, our judiciary has been rebuilding itself for a number of years. I don't want to say it is the best, but I mean, our judiciary is independent, it is fair, it is competent, it is willing to do what is required to have justice done. And this has been actually commended, and a number of times cases sent to Rwanda, especially coming from Europe, where some of these Rwandans living in the countries have explored all the domestic jurisdictions in those countries, and the Supreme Courts of these respective countries decided to send Rwandans to their motherland, to Rwanda, to face trial, because they confirmed actually the courts here are able, independent, and willing to conduct these trials in the standards, the ones that they call international standards. And actually these countries, after completing the cases in the domestic national jurisdiction, the suspects took their matter to the European Court on Human Rights, which examined the fair trial principle, issue of whether they will have lawyers to represent them, or whether they will have a fair trial, or whether they'll have they will serve the sentences in prisons that meet international standards, whether they will have all those things that are required to call a trial a fair one.
And Rwanda got a tick on all this.
And Rwanda got a tick. Actually, the European Court on Human Rights confirmed that Rwanda's domestic jurisdictions are competent enough to try these cases and deliver a fair trial. So even the ICTR, it's an international tribunal established by the UN. They sent a number of their staff to come and do an inspection on our penitentiary services, the Mpanga prison in the southern province, which they have confirmed that this prison meets all the required standards to accommodate these people. But also this is the prison that is also housing, accommodating convicts from the Sierra Leonean Special Court, Sierra Leone, and they're here. So there is no issue of fair trial or penitentiary services. So that's why I told you, diplomatic and political willingness is sometimes very important.
It's very important
to have these countries moving on.
Right. And as you say that, yes.
But I think the issue of fair trial is a false pretext.
Exactly.
Yes, false pretext. Indeed, that flag is usually raised of the lack of fair trial. Yeah. Tom says that there is actually a very great backing from European countries, to actually keep these people, these genocidaires, even safer. So what next? What does Rwanda do? How do we go about this? How do we fight this? How do we? How are we able to deal with this European machineries? How do we deal even with this red flag of lack of fair trial in Rwanda? So what
I think when you look at all the criminal jurisprudence passed by the, even not going very far, ICTR itself, in one of the cases, the judicial notice passed saying that actually genocide committed in Rwanda, genocide against the Tutsi. Recently, the UN confirmed that the genocide that was committed in Rwanda is genocide against the Tutsis. So that it is an international crime. So what we are doing actually now is to make sure that we allow these people, the investigators and prosecutors from different countries, come to Rwanda, work with our National Prosecuting Authority to conduct their own investigations with an aim of having a domestic trial in the countries where these people live. We have some challenges. Some of these fugitives have already acquired citizenship and nationality. And it becomes another process whereby someone has the nationality issue has to be removed, and then you cannot extradite your own nationals. Yes, we say, please come to Rwanda, meet our witnesses. We have a very specific witness protection program, so we don't want to expose our witnesses by conducting investigations. So we agree with these investigators. They come from Europe, most especially Europe and the United States. So they come here. So they work with our fugitives team tracking unit and our international crimes unit to build evidence with a view of conducting a prosecution in those countries. That is for those ones who are not willing to extradite for various reasons. But there are also those who want to extradite, and we have been receiving cases. I told you we received 18 cases. So these ones come to Rwanda, conduct investigations, and take the matter to court for extradition purposes. And so that's how we have received the 18 cases. So it is an ongoing process. We have what we call cooperation in criminal matters, mutual legal assistance issues. You know, these are the obligations that are under and streamlined in the international criminal law, how countries cooperate in criminal law. So you have to send what we call rogatory commissions. So they come here, we also go there. But we are doing a number of things. On the African continent, we have brought this matter to the African Association of Prosecutors through the forum that we meet, that we are meeting in. We are also having this at the East African Association of Prosecutors level, and the East African Community level, and the AU level, at least for African countries. Because this is where we are seeing our brothers and sisters lagging behind. I don't know, maybe it is because of lack of means, lack of resources, maybe legal-related issues, but at least we are in these organizations and we are passing the message. So the issue of criminal investigations of this nature is not something that you can handle in 1 decade, in 20 years. So we still have a long way to go.
There's still a long way to go. Yeah. Of course, we're going to take a very short break right now and just be able to digest some of the points that we've been able to hear on this particular show. It's a special edition, definitely looking at the issue of tracking down the genocide perpetrators or the fugitives. Talk to us, #InFocusRW. What should be done to expedite or to speed the process of tracking them down and bringing them to justice? We'll be able to look at that in the course of the program. Stay with us. This is In Focus.
Many people have been asking what we have been up to. Well, we have told the different stories from decision makers, but this time round it will be different. We will be getting head to head with various influencers and get to the heart of the matter. It is not an easy ride, but we'll endeavor to get you there. It will be insightful, informative, and at times we will agree to disagree, because we are the bridge to your leaders.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for choosing to be with us on the program. It is In Focus every Sunday, 9 p.m. And of course, we get to put on the table various topical issues just to make sense out of them. This is a special edition on Kwibuka24, of course, trying to look at the issue of tracking down the fugitives. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. Talk to us, #InFocusRW. I'm here with Jean Bosco Mutangana, the Prosecutor General. Thank you so much for still being with us. And Tom Dahiro, Genocide Scholar. Of course, before we took the break, Tom Dahiro, I want to bring you in on this one because we've spoken about the complicity levels of, you know, some of these countries that are keeping or offering a safe haven to these genocidaires. And it's very interesting and very saddening, of course, to see some of them even operating in the open, freely, some of them even taking up political spaces and positions. So, which begs the question of, is there a loophole in the international law, international legal system, when it comes to international jurisdictions, what you can do in another country if someone who has done a mistake or committed an offense can be able to be pulled down? Because this seems to be like a mockery of all these efforts that are being put to bring them to justice when they can operate in the open without anybody doing anything to them in those countries where they are?
Yeah, indeed it's something that begs a lot of questions. But again, some questions for me, they have some answers. The indifference we see today has reasons. You have a country like France, which is a permanent member of the Security Council, has a voice there, which is known to have helped these genocidaires. As they said themselves, it helped the genocidaires politically, materially, diplomatically, and morally. So today they have failed to make at least a partial divorce from these perpetrators. And they keep on sort of dilly-dallying and playing politics, but nothing much. I'm giving the example of France because here, some of those people who were indicted by the prosecution are people whose books are published in France by a genocidaires publishing house. They created a publishing house whereby they can publish their heinous literature. Holland is a base where you have people like Ndereyehe, Charles, who was the creator. I would say, had it been in the structures of the Nazis, he would be among the top 5. And he's there. He claims to be a member of the Rwandan opposition. Something that could not have happened in Europe after the Second World War. Rwanda is a special case in 2 ways. One, the genocide happened. It was stopped by the Rwandans. And the Rwandans who stopped this genocide, I mean the Rwandan Patriotic Front, had even other issues to deal with, especially to put together a shattered country. In Europe, that was not the case. The Nazi machinery was destroyed or dismantled by the Allies. And it is these very Allies, principally Britain, United States of America, and the Soviet Union, who dealt with the justice against the perpetrators. And it's important to note that even at that time, even the Genocide Convention was not there. The Genocide Convention was drafted and adopted several years later when the Nuremberg trials had started and some of them had been commuted. But for Rwanda, as opposed to what happened in Europe at that time, the United Nations, which was created after, which was there, and its charter in 1945, which created mechanisms to follow up such criminals, including the Genocide Convention, was present in Rwanda, as I said earlier. But it happened as if it didn't exist. They facilitated the flight of these fugitives. They facilitated their settlement in their countries, both in Africa and Europe and in the US and Canada. Some of them, you find them in Australia. They are moving from country A to country B to country Z. And when you ask them, why can't you try these people in your countries? Most of them do not have answers.
Most of them do not have an answer.
But key to what has to be done, I think a very good mechanism of naming and shaming these countries has to start. Because some of them, you don't find even the attachment they have to these fugitives. Some have reasons historical reasons, Belgium, some parts of Spain, if you go to Catalonia, if you go to France, you understand. But some other countries, you don't understand even why this thing happens.
Right, right. I mean, Prosecutor General,
yes,
in your work, in your efforts as the prosecution office, which countries, you were very generous, kind enough to talk to us about those who have actually come out to, you know, help to portray that political will, to actually go an extra mile in even trying these people or even extraditing them back here. Which countries are actually giving you a headache?
You know, it's very difficult to mention countries by names, especially it's also very difficult to measure the political willingness vis-a-vis what they have done.
But Tom says that would be the best way to actually poke them even more.
Some countries that have reacted to our requests to extradite Rwandans have at the same time kept so many other files, and nothing has been done about these files. So it's really very, very difficult to know whether the political willingness is actually accurate and complete. We have received a number of Rwandans from the Netherlands, but we still have fugitives in the Netherlands. We have seen 2 trials taking place, substantive trials in the Netherlands. We have seen too much support from the Dutch government since after the genocide, and we have seen too much support into the justice sector. But we have also seen extraditions from the Netherlands, I think 3 of them. But we also have another big number of them still in the Netherlands. That's 1. 2, we have seen some countries like France, Belgium conducting trials, but at the same time, several other fugitives are still in those countries. We have seen Norway, Sweden, Finland, Canada, United States. All these countries have been able to extradite or deport some of the Rwandans who have lied to the immigration officials about their background, and so they are against the municipal law of these countries. So some of them have been deported, but the deportation sometimes happens even when investigations have been going on. So we take over from there. So it's really very difficult to measure, as a prosecutor, the political willingness of a country, especially where they are doing both. Fugitives are still there, but also they are conducting trials at the same time, extradited. So I would say that the 3 of those, I mean, either trials, extraditions, or deportations, we could always talk with them and see whatever is possible, because actually our option is only 1, is only 2. You either try, because you have all the evidence gathered from this country,
or extradite them.
Or you extradite them. But you cannot fail to make a choice out of that, because international criminal law is very clear on the crime of genocide. By the way, I have to tell you that some of these countries in Africa and Europe, we have seen that some of these countries don't even have the law punishing the crime of genocide. So you find some of the criminal laws in these countries punish crimes against humanity and war crimes, and not genocide. So you cannot hold accountable a person on crimes against humanity, yet the charges that has to be preferred are genocide or genocide-related cases, because the definition of genocide is about killing members of a group in whole or in part at ethnic or national level. Whereas the definition of crimes against humanity is attacks against civilian population, systematic attacks against civilian population. So which means crimes against humanity can even occur in the absence of a genocide taking place. So we have seen some of these challenges where you send an indictment and the country will tell you, oh, but we don't have the crime of genocide in our laws. We are going to charge this person on crimes against humanity. We say, no, these are 2 different offenses. Or we are going to charge this person on war crimes, but this is about violation of Geneva Conventions and the law of wars, which does not necessarily mean genocide, because genocide, you must have a specific intent to commit that crime. That is how it is defined. So these are some of the challenges that we see. So we have been in discussions with prosecutors and law enforcement in these countries. Some of them, they tell us the legal challenge they have. But briefly, Anangwe, the issue is try or extradite. Our policy is an open door policy. You come to National Prosecution Authority, we have specialized units to work with you. We give you all the evidence we have. You use it. You can also counter-investigate and go back home, conduct a domestic trial in your cause. But you cannot honestly fail to do anything.
At the end.
So besides that, I must appreciate that some countries have done something, even though it is a drop in the ocean. So we continue to see cooperation, and we can see some shift coming up in terms of how countries understand the gravity of these offenses.
Right.
It doesn't, because actually the crime of international crimes have been, I think Tom mentioned about Nuremberg. Nuremberg the Nuremberg trials to prosecute the Nazi war criminals. That was between 1945 and 1947. So which means the international community understood that these are international crimes. So they cannot fail to understand it 70 years later. So it is much more clear than it was during the Nuremberg trials when the Nazi war criminals were being tried in Germany. So I want to say that when you look at how international law is evolving, I think the crime of genocide is very clear, understandable, and there is enough jurisprudence to have it defined and understood that these countries, even though they don't have criminal laws in their domestic legislations on the crime of genocide, but there is enough jurisprudence to make them enact legislation that would allow them to pursue these cases.
Yes, but still they have not been able to commit to actually pursue them. Yes. So in brief,
you see, in 1990, after the Second World War,
yes,
when these Nuremberg trials were conducted, the world had not even got to the name of the crime that was committed. They were still looking for the name. How do we call it?
I think one of the writers called Raphael
Lemkin was a jurist. That name. He's a Polish jurist, and when he came up with the name genocide in 1946, the Nuremberg trials had started, and the Genocide Convention came in December 1948. So in 1994, the world knew the name of this crime that was committed.
So the countries that are actually not actually doing enough is just an excuse as far as not understanding the whole...
A more than lame excuse. And he mentioned about African countries which whereby several members of the genocidal machinery have sought refuge. Maybe they can say, we don't know where they are. We cannot locate them. They are part of us. They don't look different from us. They can't. We don't have exact addresses. In Europe, it's different. Everybody is known where he or she is, with the address, names, a street, or whatever. But even these African countries, if a country like Rwanda, which is a member of the African Union, tells you, we know someone is there. We even go, I think they even go as far as, we know he works somewhere. He has established business somewhere. He's teaching in a certain university. I know one of two genocidaires who were convicted here in Rwanda. They are the fugitives, and they have been... one of the husband teaches, I think, pharmacy at the University of Western Cape, and so there is the wife. But of course, South Africa hasn't done much. Here I'm talking about the case of Dr. P. Mugabo. Initially, he was teaching at the University of Nairobi before he moved to South Africa. So I think there is a necessity to have a different form of shout and look for a different loudspeaker to tell these people, hey guys, you are betraying the commitment and the spirit of the Genocide Convention.
Right. And so Prosecutor, you feel name and shame is a no-no. It cannot really bear any fruit. Just to put a final nail on that coffin of the proposal by Tom.
I mean, how many times would you name and shame, and what would be the result? I think as a prosecutor, I think we have to pursue these cases, make sure we provide strong, tangible evidence, as we have always done, reach out to our partners in different countries, use the different fora to which we belong, like the African Prosecutors Association, East African Association of Prosecutors, the African Union, the ESC, the Economic Community of the Great Lakes region, the conference on the Great Lakes region and several other kind of arrangements, regional arrangements in place to make sure that the issue of Rwandan genocide fugitives is tabled at the highest ministerial, presidential levels possible, so that we prosecutors, we keep on pushing with our investigations, with our evidence, whereas on the different front, we have a very strong diplomatic and political push. This will take so long, but it may eventually yield some results. Because actually it is about a country. Countries have their own reserved domain of how they conduct their businesses. So you'll name them and shame them, but eventually these are independent and sovereign countries. So they always probably have some reasons to give you. So I think to build a very strong case, as we've always done, I told you we sent over close to 900 international arrest warrants through Interpol and to countries. And you have made sure that these countries have received them. So what they do is they call us. They say, oh, do you have really this information about this person? Yes, we have him in our records. We said, please come over to Rwanda. You come and see what we have. So I think continued engagement will be probably yield much more results than shaming and naming them. Of course, that can be done. But in terms of investigations and prosecutions and willingness to extradite or conduct domestic trials, we have to balance it and see which comes of much more importance.
Right. I want to move this conversation forward a bit and talk about...
But another thing, Eugene, you shouldn't think that a prosecutor would be operating as I do. Our modus operandi my modus operandi is different.
Exactly.
For me, if I know someone is there and is a fugitive, I will name that person, I will name that country, and I will name that, and I will ask that country in my writing.
Yeah, that's also another way of doing it. Yes.
He can do it because prosecutions, they have their rules of operating, and he can't do it as I do, or the Survivors Association of which I belong.
But he feels, you know, for how long, for how many countries, they will always have...
As long as you are still alive.
You must continue naming and shaming. All right.
We have seen some of the Nazi war criminals being tried over 90 years. So I think our generation is still a young generation. So we are going to work on this until probably...
We are going to pass this assignment
also another
to others.
generation will come and pursue this.
Yeah, but when you say that, someone will be like, I mean, justice delayed is justice denied.
Absolutely.
And so they'll feel like, I mean, are we giving up? Are we feeling like, you know, for example, Felicien Kabuga's story. I mean, there was a time when he was all over, you know, the media was all over speaking about him. Everybody was actually talking about his search and all that. But today, nobody seems to be saying anything. I mean, it sort of has gone quiet. Are we giving up?
The mechanism for international criminal tribunals under the authority of President Meron and Prosecutor Serge Bramets, they are handling this case. Nothing stops us from also investigating it. But the UN has put in all those resources to make sure that Kabuga and others are investigated. And we have been given assurances in the recent past that actually they are doing all their best to make sure they get him. I think that's one of the big fish in the history of international criminal law that I've known. So it's really all about...
So is Augustine Bizimana, who was the Minister of Defense?
So this is, we are in touch with the mechanism for international criminal tribunals. They have their office in Arusha, another office in The Hague. So we've been working with them. They are our colleagues, our prosecutors. So we work together to make sure that whatever information that has to be shared at prosecutorial level has to be shared. But this is absolutely the work of the mechanism to ensure they track Kabuga and get him. This is because I think they have much more resources and the mandate to move all over the world and speak with different authorities in different countries than our office could do. So, but whatever we are required to give, because Kabuga is a Rwandan national and crimes committed in Rwanda and the victims are Rwandans, so definitely also the witnesses come from Rwanda. So we are always in touch with our partners all over the world to make sure that we can have something done. And so whenever we are called upon to help, we are always ready to help.
Some say he could be turning 81 now. I mean, is there a feeling from the Survivors Association that probably the fire to actually keep looking for him is slowly dying out?
No, 81 years doesn't make anyone innocent. He should be tried even if he's 100 years of age. Because he terminated so many lives who would be 40, 50, 60 next years. So the issue of age is not a mitigation. and there's no excuse for this person not to be tracked and tried. Even if he's on a deathbed, he should be tried. The case, he can only evade trial if he's dead. But as long as he's still alive, get to them and take them to court.
Is there a feeling that, I mean, enough is not being done to actually keep that momentum of looking for him?
They are the Kabugas, the Augustine Bizimana, who have decided to disappear from the arms of law. But there are others, I'm telling you, who just move freely with impunity. This is the case of Nderehe. Charles, you have the Shingiro Mbonyumutwas in Belgium. They are there. You have the Mhiranya Prote. Their books are published in France. So you can't say this. You are publishing a book of a person whom you don't know where he is, unless if you have written that book for him. This person who published the book for them, whom is called Eugene Shimamungu, is Eugene in your namesake. He published their books, and he should.
But different ideas.
No. But I'm saying he's
Yes,
called
I
Eugene.
get the point. I get the point.
Yeah,
Yes,
you get the point. I'm sorry to say. He's called Eugene Shimamungu. He published the book of Fugitives and Criminals. We should ask them, you guys, this man has been publishing he published a book of someone who is wanted by the international justice.
Yes.
We should ask them. France should be asking them.
Yeah, but the
And
minister
there are several others who are known. Rwamucyo, Eugene Bukibaruta, Laurent, Dr. Sostene Munyemana, they're in France. They are known. These are known fugitives, but who have even been employed by the government of France or private sector in France.
and they continue to walk
They are
freely.
different from Kabuga, who decided to go underground.
Right. The Minister of Foreign Affairs in one of the press conferences did acknowledge, the appreciation of the change of attitude in the new regime in France and, the warming up of relations between Rwanda and France. Do you see or do you feel that this will create a bigger impact in actually doing the things that you're proposing for the fugitives who continue to stay in France, for instance?
I always prefer not to speculate. So until when something is done to prove that there is a change of mentality and a change of positions, political positions in France, I remain convinced France has not changed as far as their policies towards the genocide fugitives. The denialism, genocide denialism in France, it's so terrible that you find one of the journalists saying that the genocide in Rwanda was bastards facing other bastards, and she's not prosecuted. If she said the same in reference to the Holocaust, I'm sure she would lose her job and she would find herself in court.
Right. So until France acts, that's when you'll actually believe
Yes.
there's been a change of attitude. In closing, Prosecutor General, I mean, I want to hear from you 3 things that you need as prosecutors or as the prosecutor yourself, Prosecutor General, to actually bring to justice the remaining fugitives who continue to run or to be on the loose. What are those 3 things that you need to actually assure those survivors that we are doing something or we are actually acting on this?
I just want to assure the survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi that one thing we are doing is that we are keeping pressure on investigators and our counterparts in different countries. So we are relentlessly pursuing this matter. Nevertheless, and regardless of the legal dynamics involved, but I want to assure everyone that the National Public Prosecution of Rwanda is committed to pursuing these matters. And having drawn close to 900 indictments in 10 years, despite of the challenges that are involved in investigations and cooperation in criminal matters. But we have relentlessly pursued these matters to their right offices where they are. So we speak to our partners, and we have established a mechanism of cooperation in criminal matters, mutual legal assistance, and all the required to make sure that these people are investigated. Second is we have established a strong mechanism through the African alliances of our prosecutors, from the right executive of the African prosecutors presidency to the regional and sub-regional. So which means we are building a network from our own sub-region to the African continent that helps us advocacy that goes beyond to the International Association of Prosecutors and the International Tribunals prosecutors. So we are in touch with all of them. So we have to understand this is something to do with a country's laws and people living in those countries. So it's not, you're not going to go into the country and pick someone and bring him to Rwanda. So my assurance, one, is we are keeping in touch with all the law enforcement in the region. We are pursuing on a daily, monthly basis with prosecutors in the region to make sure, and beyond, to make sure these people are investigated. Maybe one of the most important things I want to say,
and probably add just three things that you'll need to expedite or see the success of some of those efforts you've made, just very briefly.
The first one is continued strengthening cooperation. That is one. It's very key. Without continued and strengthened cooperation, you won't have a network. So we have built a network. Second one is calling for diplomatic push.
Right.
And diplomatic push that allows a political atmosphere to have these cases tried. So diplomatic push both from Rwanda and from other areas where we can push. I mean, it can be either from Rwanda or also from our friends all over the world. Third is also partnering with everyone, including genocide survivors and all those people who want to see justice being done, to be on our side, to make sure they give us information, right information where these people are.
Right.
But most importantly also, because we also want to follow up with the issue of genocide ideology that comes as a result of failure to hold accountable these people, breeds the culture, a very bad genocide ideology culture, especially in the Western world, through publications, through what Tom was talking about, the books that are published by these perpetrators. How do you publish a book and then you say you don't know where the person is? So briefly, that is my take on what's going on.
Thank you so much, Jean Bosco Mutangana, the Prosecutor General, and of course, Tom Dahiro, for being with us and sharing your insights on this very important matter. Thank you also for watching. Of course, these are many among the many conversations that we'll be having throughout this period. Of course, keep in touch with us. The show is In Focus, and my name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. We'll see you again next time, same place. Goodbye for now.